it's so peculiar and beautiful. From the first time I saw it, it made a great impression to me. So, if you don't mind, I would love if it's okay to start by talking about how you first thought of it, or how is the very genesis of it.
Oh, well, thanks. I mean, that's lovely of you to say. First of all, just can't believe I'm here hanging out with Guillermo del Toro. So we don't know each other. Well, I don't know if you remember this, but we met very briefly in an elevator going up at the Austin Television Festival. I think I was there with Orphan Black, and you were very lovely to me, by the way. You probably don't remember meeting me, but I was like, oh my God, he was so nice to me. Anyway, I'm such a huge fan, so I need a moment to just fanboy for a second. So all these movies, Kronos and Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth, and I know the other night you said like no one went to see Nightmare Alley. I loved Nightmare Alley. So, yeah, just a huge fan of your work, and very excited to be here. Thank you, by the way. I guess this movie was, probably simmering for quite a long time. My first feature film was kind of a coming-of-age thriller that no one really saw. And I think, good enough movie, but no one really sort of fell through the cracks and didn't really get noticed. So with this, I had been working on a lot of horror ideas. In fact, I had become a filmmaker because of my investment and my love for horror cinema, and probably I think I also used filmmaking and horror as a way to overcome my fear. I was like one of those kids that was afraid of everything. I was afraid of the dark. I was afraid of people. I was afraid of going out. I was really a scared little kid, and I think that I also became very significantly traumatized by a number of films that had this incredible power over me, and there were so many. There were a lot of weird ones like Killdozer and like Black Christmas, and and I realized at some point, as my brain became more sophisticated, that these didn't just exist, that someone actually made them. And I found that the way to get beyond my fear was to understand how they were made. And so, you could imagine whatever scary moment from a movie, whatever like really freaks you out, like, I don't know, like Halloween, like the guy, Michael Myers stabbing the dude in the hallway, that was a set. There was a movie, there were lights, there was a boom mic, there was a camera, there was a whole bunch of people crowded around. It wasn't scary when they made it. And I think that was really something, when I really started to realize that was a really significant change. And horror films was a really big part of that. So I think this was kind of brewing. It was a long time coming. And because I had previously made a coming-of-age movie about some young boys, I had kind of turned my horror mind to working with girls. And I had a writer that I was really interested in. Karen Walton, I think, had a really incredible voice. And we both grew up in the horror of the suburbs. And it kind of started from there. I mean, I think I was interested in making a metamorphosis, transformation movie. I wasn't interested in making a werewolf movie. In fact, for the longest time, I kind of fought that. I didn't really, I liked the idea of like icky body horror, but I wasn't necessarily wanting to make a werewolf movie because I thought they were all cheesy. I hated all of them, except for maybe American Werewolf in London, which really became a touch point for, and all the movies you mentioned, Carrie, The Fly, Dead Ringers, Heavenly Creatures, Heathers was probably an influence in there. That was kind of the beginning. But it was always these two sisters. It was this story of this indelible, unbreakable bond between these two sisters growing up in the suburbs that were outcasts that were, were outsiders and didn't belong and wouldn't conform and lived in their kind of their own world. And that was kind of the beginning of it was very character first, and then the concept of a metamorphosis. And then eventually it was like, oh my God, I guess we're making a werewolf movie. And then after that, the other layers began to reveal themselves. The metaphor, the lunar cycles, the menstrual cycles, all of that biological icky fun that we had began to reveal itself. So, but I think in the beginning, Guillermo, it was really about those two girls, and it was about that journey that we wanted to take them, just to torture them and try and pull them apart and bring them back together. And it still gets me at the end of the movie, seeing that as we kind of pan down the girl's art that says forever, and with Bridget crying, it's still very moving.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The reason, I mean, if we are lucky enough, I would love to do a second cycle like this, Canadian Madness, and have, yes, Alice, Sweet Alice, and have Black Christmas, and have The Mask, and so forth. But what you're talking about that I'm very taken by, and I want to talk to you more about Karen Walton and what she brought in. There is a threshold in adolescence which becomes incredibly brutal. It's biological. Boys that are friends with girls, when the girls grow, something happens. When sisters are the same age up until a certain point, and one grows biologically faster or earlier than the other, another barrier is erected. And I think the film captures, unlike any other I have seen, that barrier that comes with a biological change. I mean, it's, I guess from the point of view of the parents, The Exorcist would be something that talks about opening the door of your daughter and her head is spinning, I guess. But this is a beautiful barrier that I haven't seen many movies tackle it, and I wonder how the fusion was with Karen. I see a third writer credited, and I would love to hear about her and what the other writer did and how the screenplay, which I think is very strong, came to be.
A third writer?
I read somewhere that there was somebody else that polished the screenplay or something like that. Is that true or not?
No, I mean we had a story editor that we worked with pretty strongly. I cannot remember the name of this man now. But it was me and Karen. It was
So how did that fusion occur? Because it's beautiful. It looks great.
Well, thank you. I mean, Karen was, at the time, we were boyfriend-girlfriend, so we were living in the same apartment, and I wanted to make a horror film, and she didn't. And I had to I was like, can you just hear me out? Just listen to this. I think you'll like this idea. And frankly, the fact that you don't like horror films is maybe a good thing. So it became a challenge to her to write a horror film that she would like to see. And I really felt like to tell this story in an authentic way, I needed a female voice. It was really important. And I needed that to give these characters the real the life that they needed to have. I wanted to be very invested in them. It was incredibly important that we believed them, that they weren't just two-dimensional, that we cared about them, and that was really important. And then so to have Karen and have all of her crazy teenage experiences, be loaned into the script, I think, and her voice, I think, was really powerful. And so when we were together, she would, I would read stuff. The way we worked on the script is, I would read stuff. She, give her comments. She would go upstairs, write for a few hours, come downstairs. I'd read them again. We'd talk about them. She'd go back upstairs, write, come back down. That was literally how we did it. There was probably some dope smoking and some drinking. I think one night I remember having had a few drinks and she said the words ginger snaps, and we laughed for about 20 minutes because there was no character named Ginger. We went, oh my God, and suddenly we had this movie that we had the title of the movie because there was no, and it was just always fun. Like it was a fun script to write. Like it was, we would laugh our guts out and write late into the night, and it took a number of drafts, but it was always it was a really fun thing, and maybe shooting it was different because it was a very tight budget and schedule, but writing it was fantastic.
I think the title is amazing, and it vertebrates the movie in a beautiful way because it is that moment when Ginger snaps into a biological reality, existential reality. Is really very, very remarkable. The other thing that the movie captures beautifully, I think there is a time in adolescence when everyone and everything is your enemy. You know, in the house, outside the house, in the neighborhood, in the school, and the unity that they have, which is very poignant and strong on the beginning, is and then it takes a biological wild turn, almost incestuous at one point, and ends up in that, which I think is extremely part of the Canadian horror, the melancholy, the marriage of melancholy and exploitation. I think the movie has that uncanny marriage of exploitation elements and a melancholy and a sense of loss that is captured remarkably in the final shot. That beautiful pullback, symmetric in the composition and all that is astounding. This is your second film, and you are dealing with 3 or 4 tones, tonal things that should never be together, and yet they are. So it feels like a second film that you were afraid would be your last film, and you put everything in. So talk to me a little bit about that.
I think you're probably right. There's probably more layers in there than maybe need to be, but it's interesting because certainly some things that you have commented on. I've been attending the last few nights. So I was here for David, and I was here for Vincenzo, and I had never met David before, and I came to see. I had seen Rabbit, of course, but I had never met David, and I excused myself partway through the screening and kind of talk people into letting me into the green room to see him, just to acknowledge that I had liberally stolen from his movies, that I had basically taken pieces from The Fly and from Dead Ringers, and the end of this movie, there certainly was some Dead Ringers inspiration there, but it's interesting that you would say the melancholy. I mean, I just knew that I wanted a very emotional end to the movie, and I was, I was deeply afraid. I think when we were shooting that finale, it was the very last week of shooting. We did everything else up until that the battle in the house, and I was really afraid of this suit that we had created, this monster suit, because I was like, oh my God, I didn't think it looked very good. I'm like, oh my God, just use less light, we can't show it. I cut 90% of the things we shot of the monster out of the movie, but I remember being because I was saying, yeah, we can't show that. And I remember just on set being very tortured about whether people were gonna buy it or not. And then when we got to the end of the movie, literally, I think it was the last day, it was the last night, it was late at night, and it was maybe the second to last shot, because we shot the whole thing in order, and there was this emotional moment where Emily Perkins, who plays Bridget, was going to, I was behind the monitor, and she was dry for a couple of takes, and I would go and talk to her, and then suddenly, she just started crying, and it was so emotional. I started crying, behind the monitor. And it was 3 o'clock in the morning, of course, and we were all super tired. But it was that moment when I realized that what was lying on, that it didn't matter what was lying on the floor. This rubber suit lying on the floor, it didn't matter. What mattered was this emotional, the power of that performance, and how connected I felt to that character in that moment. And I just knew that that was the ending of the movie. That was how the movie needed to end.
Yeah, and curiously enough, I've gone through 30 years of career, and at age 60, I would say I would support that as a rule. Is not because monster movie making is ultimately a theater of masks in Greek theater. You know, they can be immobile, they can be, but they represent something. And the real secret is the person looking at it.
Mm.
That is really the secret. If they look at it and they don't see, they see a character, the audience is with them. I have learned this in many ways, and I think there are moments. This takes me to a decision you made probably early on. This is 2000. In 1990, in the end of the 90s, Jurassic Park had what 5-6 minutes of CG, but by 2000, many movies were doing much more than that, 10-15 minutes of CG, and you very, very pointedly go to Paul Jones and do physical effects. I think I spotted, I may be wrong, is there a moment in stop motion right before the van hits it? Is that stop motion?
I don't think it's stop motion, but what it is it's shot in front of a green screen. So it was so it kind of, there is that was one of the few things that we use some digital compositing for, yeah.
But you very pointedly go for physical effects, so that is and not only that, you go for a werewolf without hair.
Yeah.
Which is it truly is. I would say if we were drinking in a bar, I would say that's suicidal. but you go for this. So the fact that you pull it off all the way to the end, and that is one of the most efficient things. Talk to me about how you guided. There are many moments of makeup that are incredibly effective. The moment she curves her back and the backbone pops up a little is beautiful. The subtle makeup on the beginning where you start joining the forehead and the nose and this and that. Tell me about the process of guiding directing this makeup with Paul Jones.
Well, you know, it was it's interesting. So so one of the things, and I don't know if you know this, but so over the last couple of nights, David Cronenberg, of course, big influence on Ginger Snaps. Second night, Vincenzo Natali, who was a concept artist for me and a storyboard artist, and he was the one. He had done storyboards for my first feature film, which was called The Boys Club, and at the time. And then he went on to direct Cube, and then he came back to help me with Ginger Snaps, and he is such an incredible artist. And so it was really him and I working together, concepting out this monster, concepting out the look of the transitions. It was really him and I that did all the original, the first work on it before Paul Jones became involved. And Vince drew these like incredible images of this female monster, and I, you know, because I was afraid of like the hairsuit, because I thought that that's what made werewolves look cheesy. We worked out this sort of beautiful hellhound look. And of course it was incredible in Vince's drawing was amazing. Now, trying to pull that off with a person in a suit, it didn't translate quite as well as like Vincenzo's drawings and the maquettes that we made. But it was Vince that kind of, you know, just drawing all the pieces, all the like the eye pieces and all the different looks, and then kind of working with Paul Jones. But Vincenzo was very much a collaborator in terms of storyboarding that entire last sequence and just being a very helpful visual dude when it came to trying to conceive what we were going to do at the end of the movie and what the monster looked like. So it's pretty cool that these two guys showed up before Ginger Snaps. I don't know if you premeditated that, Guillermo, but that was pretty amazing.
Well, there's a line that I don't want to bore everybody that is there, but there's a strange line between Vincenzo Mimic and your movie. We share many things. Jeremy North on Broken Glasses, an autistic character. In your case, the janitor that gets killed is the priest that gets killed in the opening of Mimic.
Oh my God! Right. Well, he was a stunt guy.
He was a stunt guy, and we share many of the same crew. Jordan Samuel has worked with me many times. Many of the people that do the contacts and all that. But that's why I very specifically wanted to have your movie, because it has still the breath of the sort of the remnants of the tax break horror breath, the intention and the artistic sort of streak that I really enjoy. And one thing that it has also in common with Rabbit and Shivers, and we talked about it with David that day. Modern horror for me is versus when Richard Madison brings everything in literature to urban and suburban America, and Stephen King does even more so, takes it to little towns that you should recognize, and brands of detergent or ding-dongs or food, or and the vulgarity of everyday life is so essential in Rabbit and in this one, and I think that you open with an almost documentary series of images of the suburban dread that you grew up in, that you say we shared, Karen and you shared that suburban dread, and I think that those are the first horror images in the
It really is.
And then you have things that are so good. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to praise for a second, but you have oblique science with the 16 millimeter film in school. You have metaphors like the tail being taped to the leg as a very sort of a clunky solution to adolescence. You have the school nurse that is positively brutal in her description of a period, and these details ground the other stuff. When you say how did it work, I think that's how it worked. The werewolf was the fly of fancy, and you can be expressive if you are familiar with makeup effects. William Tuttle, one of the great ones, is always a little exaggerated. And the contrast of that flight of fancy in your makeup and the layer of vulgarity and reality is what makes the movie absolutely, I think the clash between Karen and you in your sensibilities, one wanting to make a horror movie, one reluctantly making a horror movie, are also visually very interesting in your film. I'm sorry, there's no question here. I think it's a vital point of inflection in your movie on Canadian horror.
Woo! Thank you.
And you're welcome. Let's talk a little bit about this. When you tackle the movie, has moments of great sophistication visually. There are moments that feel very designed, very storyboarded, and then there are other moments where I can see you going wild with the camera in the attacks, using the visual language of the passing lights in the van for the transformation. Yeah. There is a lot of visual ingenuity. Did this come? How much of this was found on the set, and how much of this was planned?
I think those things that you speak of, I think those were very planned, very storyboarded. I do feel that I like, when I'm working in more dramatic scenes, sometimes I like to work a little bit more organically and not be a little bit more in the moment. But when I'm doing action, or we're doing a special effects, or there's scary suspense sequences, those tend to be fairly thoroughly thought out. but I always like to leave space for happy accidents. I don't like to be super rigorous, even if I feel like I've planned things to a T, because things happen and occur in the moment. And I feel like I've always been a person that likes to react to what I'm seeing, and sometimes what I've planned is not the best plan. And I think, and there's all sorts of different things that happen, especially in a low budget movie. Like, certainly time is not your friend, and money, there's never enough money, and often you have to think on the fly and have a B plan. And I think there was a fair amount, there was a decent amount of that. I tried to, I obviously preserved the integrity of everything that we had done, all the thinking that had led up to shooting, but on the day, things happen. And sometimes really great things. Like I think some really terrific performances that, like there was a funny story about Mimi Rogers. The one of the scenes that I really loved in the script, which I thought was hilarious, is Pam finding the bloody underwear in the laundry, which I thought, Karen wrote that, I of course, and I just thought it was hilarious. I thought, and Mimi was really funny, and we shot 3 or 4 takes of it, and I said, that's great, and we were going to move on, and she goes, John, can I just try one more thing? And I said, of course, and we rolled, and she, picks up the underwear and looks at them, and there's this moment where you think she's cluing in, and then she reaches for the spray and wash bottle and like sprays the underwear, and that was very much a Mimi thing, a thing. When she did that, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh my, she really gets this character, and was there were these places. As much as it was designed and thought out, there was also this feeling of like trying to let it breathe and be real and be emotional and find it in the moment as well.
And I think, and that, by the way, that underwear scene is followed by the most brutal dessert ever served in a family table. But the thing that I also love, and it is a commonality with Rabbit, I think that when filmmakers, male or female, tackle female characters, the biggest cruelty is the idealization. And that's an act of brutality, either as a femme fatale, complete, or as an object of beauty. I love that these characters, from the start, are full of beautiful flaws. They are not exemplary. They are not idealized. They're not particularly articulate about their plight, but they are incredibly close. And casting them, I'm very curious about how you cast them. What stroke of luck, or how did you find these two that have that connection?
Well, casting this movie was definitely a thing. I don't know if you heard any stories about that time period casting it, if anyone was around, or if you had heard Guillermo, but when we were casting this, it was 1999, and we were casting it, and we were going to shoot in September, and so we were probably casting in June, July, something like that, and Columbine had happened in April. And about a week or 10 days later, there was a shooting in Taber, Alberta, as well. And there was this sudden, like, this was in everyone's mind when these scripts went out to, we were trying to find a casting director. And not only did no one want to do it, the Toronto casting community got together and basically boycotted the casting, boycotted Ginger Snap, saying that it was exploitive, that it was filled with teen violence, teens killing teens, and on top of that, it was sort of, the killing was kind of connected to goth culture. because of the way the boys in Columbine dressed in the black jackets, and so, you know, suddenly it was Satanic Panic #2. And it was, and it became so big that it would actually, there were news stories about it in the Star and in the Globe and Mail, and it certainly, you know, put a lot of dampers on just, not just casting, but trying to find locations. No schools would let us on their property. It became very complicated, but. So we wound up looking in Vancouver and had a little bit more luck than we did in Toronto. And we did eventually have a casting director, Robin Cook, thank God.
Which I work with,
yeah. And we found these two young women in Vancouver, and it was the weirdest thing. So, you know, because we saw a lot of Americans, we looked far and wide, and suddenly these two young women showed up in Vancouver, and not only did they both come from Vancouver, they both had the same agent, they both had worked together and been in scenes together, they both were born in the same hospital, you know, and they knew each other. And so there was already this familiarity between the two of them. It wasn't like manufactured. They came out and they already had this real ease between them. Emily was quite a bit older than Catherine. Emily, I think, was 22 at the time, and she looks 15. And Catherine was probably 18 or 19, I suppose. But it was just this incredible, they came with this baked-in chemistry. And so what a fortunate thing to find that. And I was certainly very blessed and very lucky to find those two.
Yeah, and I think that those are the eyes looking at the monster, and that's why partially everything gels together. So I know we want to open for questions for the audience, but I want to thank you first of all, and I really think tomorrow when we go to see the Noam Chomsky epistemological horror. that is Pontypool, that I adore. I will express a little more of why these movies were hinged the way they were hinged with yours, and what I think the last two movies signify to Canadian horror. But you, my friend, are a very important part of it, and I open it to questions. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Amazing. We do have time for questions about